Multiplication, how we teach it, and just a few methods that you could use with some younger children or children at the start of their multiplication learning journey. Now, most of the time when people think about multiplication, we think about times tables, and yes, that is essentially the end goal, but what's really important is that children understand exactly what multiplication means. So in my class, how I would usually start this is not by using the multiplication symbol. When we think multiplication, that is the obvious one, but when we talk about multiplication and when children are reading multiplication number sentences from a young age, we look at this as groups of and lots of. So it's really good to get them used to that language of groups of and lots of. That way, when they're reading a problem, they will be able to understand exactly what that problem means. So say they had a problem of 8 times 7. This is way above, I would, year 1, year 2. I would say this is mid to end year 3, beginning year 4. And they would usually be going on to much harder multiplication strategies, but this is just simple multiplication for the very beginning to understand how to simplify it. So like I said, if we were looking at 8 times 7, I wouldn't expect younger children or children at the beginning of their journey to read that as 8 times 7. I would expect them to read that as 8 groups of 7 or 8 lots of. And that will help them then to use these drawing strategies, which I will talk about now. So the first way that I would teach this is what's called repeated addition, and this is that this looks at adding the same number over and over and over and over and over again. I'd usually do this by showing a picture first, so it might be something like cookies. So I would show them this picture. Now, these are my cookies, okay? They're nothing more than cookies that you would just eat biscuits. So what we would be looking at is how many there are in the groups and how many groups they're separated into. So I can see that this is one group here and this is one group here. How many are there in this group? 3, and it's really important that when they're learning multiplication they understand it's always going to be equal, so the groups will be equal. If they're not equal groups, then it makes it really hard and we have to look at multiplying in different number sentences. So making sure that everything is equal, making sure that everything is the same is really important for these strategies. So like I said, I know that this group has got 3 and I know that this group has also got 3. So what I'm going to do is add 2 groups of 3 together. So your repeated addition number sentence will be 3 add 3. This repeated number sentence looks at adding the same number twice, and that's why it's called repeated addition. Now you could do this lots and lots of times, so I could draw another group of cookies here, and that would be another group of 3. So to my repeated addition, I would then add another group of 3. So this time we've got 3, add 3, add 3. So I'm adding one group of 3 to another group of 3 to another group of 3. And then I would be asked to find the answer. This, what I would say, would probably go on for a couple of days, looking at how many you are looking at. And this is called counting on in or counting up in. And this would be looking at repeated addition, like I've said. So a really simple way to then transition into repeated addition would be to look at how many groups you have got. So say this time I've got buttons. I'm just thinking of what's really easy for me to draw here. I'm no artist. and then I'll do one more down here. So here I have got groups of buttons, one group of buttons there, one group of buttons, another group of buttons, another, and another. So my repeated addition sentence for this, I would only be looking at how many is in each group at the moment. I don't need to know how many groups there are. So my first group, well, this got 1, 2, 3, 4 buttons, so it'll be 4, add the next group, which is obviously 4, because they're all equal, add the next group, which is 4, add the next group, which is 4, and then add the next group, which is 4. So this is my repeated addition number sentence. 4, add 4, add 4, add 4, add 4. Now, to work this out, obviously, I can count in fours if I know how to do it. But what's so good about having these drawings and knowing that we're adding each time is that I can count on in ones if I need to. And like I said, this is the very beginning of multiplication. So, I could count them all up to work this out. Then I would start going into multiplication with repeated addition, and this is where I would be writing in sentences, so not number sentences like we have been, but writing in actual sentences, so we have got statements. So this now, I need to look at how many lots of 4, and this is where lots and groups have come into. So how many groups of 4 have I got? Well, I can count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I have got 5 groups of, and then how many groups have I got? I've got one group of 4, that's a group of 4, that's a group of 4, that's a group of 4, and that's a group of 4. So it's 5 groups of 4, or 5 lots of 4. So that's how we would transition into so this is now circle and dots. I don't think that's the official name for it. I think some people like to call it cakes and plates. So you draw plates like circles and you would draw the cakes, that how many cakes are on each plate. But I call it circle and dots just because it makes it so much less confusing and it's a lot less time consuming for the children as well. Otherwise they're sat there drawing really detailed cakes, which is lovely. But this is a stepping stone, remember. This isn't the last method that we will expect them to use. So with this method, it's all about now understanding the order of which we draw and in terms of the group size. So I've written one here of 6 groups of 2. So I would expect them to read that as 6 groups of 2. And when they're at the very beginning, I would expect them to be able to translate that then into 6 times 2, okay? I would say in year 2, end of year 1, you would start looking at as times. However, I would say the language that is mainly used is groups of, just so it's really, really clear in their heads, and they'll be able to picture things. So when they read a number sentence like this, they'll be able to picture it really quickly. So again, this is another pictorial strategy. This is a stepping stone for where we would like them to be at the end. But what I should expect them to do is be able to say, right, 6 groups of 2. That means I need 6 groups. They can draw 6 circles. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I would say if you have a child that has very, very small handwriting, it draws things really tiny, it would really benefit them from practicing this to be able to draw them big enough. They have to be able to clearly see how many there is in each group so that they can count in the correct groups. So 2s is easy, but I would say when you get to things like 10s, 8s, 7s, bigger numbers, sometimes even 5s, they can draw them so tiny that they can't actually read them carefully. So I would say that's one thing just to look out for. So here I've got my 6 groups, and in each group I need 2 because it's 6 groups of 2. It's not 2 groups of 6. Okay, 2 groups of 6 would look very differently. So 6 groups of 2, so that means in each group I need 2. Now these methods are all called grouping because what we're doing is we're grouping, we're putting a specific number into each group because I already know how many groups there are. There is a very similar method like this used for division, and it's called sharing, but that's when we know the answer, that's when we know the biggest number. With multiplication, we never know what the biggest number is going to be at the end. So it's really important to know the difference between grouping and sharing. And I'll be doing another video on division for that strategy. So what I've got here is my 6 groups, and in each group there is 2. So now I can count them to see how many there is in each. So how many there is altogether, sorry. So 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12. If they know their 2 times table, which they probably will do, then it's really good for them to count in that number. If they're still quite early on in their journey, then it doesn't matter, they can count these in ones. That's why it's really important to make sure that it's really clear and that you can count exactly how many there is in each. Arrays are really good to learn for when we are looking at multiplication and division, because they can be used in both areas. What is really important is learning how to read an array so that you can write a number sentence, or so that you can actually use it to help you solve a number sentence. They can be flipped and turned. One thing is important to remember about multiplication is that it is cumulative, which means it can go either way. So it doesn't matter which way round these numbers are, as long as it doesn't matter which way around the numbers are, because they will always make the same number sentence. That is true of multiplication and addition. So this is where they are quite easily linked. However, if your child is being asked to write a number sentence from an array, this is where it's really important to understand how you read an array. It all sounds very confusing, I'll explain. So, all arrays have rows and columns, and they're usually done in dots. So if I was going to read this number problem, I'd read it as 4 lots of 5. So I need to make sure that I've got the correct amount of rows, and then in each row I have the correct number of columns. So I always say the first number is your rows, and the second number are your columns. So in this one here, I'm going to need 4 rows, and in each row I need 5 columns. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This here is one group of 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now what's really nice about arrays is that they are really clearly marked as groups. So I can see that's one group of 5. That's 2 groups of 5, that's 3 groups of 5, and that's 4 groups of 5, which is what it's asked me for. Because it's really clear in terms of the groups, I can then count using that number. 5, 10, 15, 20. Like I said, these can be switched, which cumulative, which means they can be switched. So this is where it's really important that you read an array correctly. So, if I didn't have a number sentence and I was being asked to write one, if I had this, I can see that there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So there are 5 rows. So I'm looking at 5 groups of something. I can see there is 2 in each row, so there's 2 columns. So this would be read as 5 lots of 2. However, where this then changes is if I was to switch it round. So instead of it being horizontal, it is then vertical. No, I've got that wrong. Oh, it's been a long half term. Instead of it being vertical, it is then horizontal. Goodness me. So with this, you just need to be really careful that they're writing it in the correct order. So rows first, then columns. So this one I would read as 2 rows. So this is 2 groups of, or 2 lots of, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 columns in each. So the same numbers, they would both make the same answer, 10, 10, but they both look differently, and that's why they need to be written differently. A blank number line is probably your last step before counting on your fingers in your head using times tables. And that's because in this one, when it's still a pictorial strategy because you're still drawing it to help you, but it's less time consuming, and it takes more to count in groups, if that makes sense. So if I've got 8 lots of 10, I need to start at 0, because remember, in multiplication the numbers get bigger. So I'm going to start at 0, and this time what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump in tens, because this says I need 8 groups of 10. So I'm not drawing a group of 10, but I will be counting and jumping in a group of 10. So this here would be 1 lot of 10, okay? Or we'll say at 10. So it's almost like your repeated addition. So 1 lot of 10 is 10. If I've then got 2 lots of 10, that is 20. 3 lots of 10 is 30. Add another 10 is 40. Add another 10, that's 50. Add another 10, that's 60. Add another 10, that's 70. And then if I do one more 10, that is 80. So yes, I'm counting in tens, but what I've done is I've written it down, and this is where half of the problem is. When children jump too quickly to using their multiplication, they will often miss a number. So in the twos, they will often go 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 16, 18, 20. They've completely missed a number, but they haven't understood, they haven't recognised that they've missed it. When it's here and it's written down, yes, they might do this first of all, scribble down the answer, go on to the next question, but we always tell them to check their answers. So hopefully you would expect that they would come back and go, oh, that doesn't make sense because I've missed a number. Therefore, they haven't had to work it out so many times, and they can really clearly see where they've gone wrong. And it's important that they see where they've gone wrong, because they won't learn unless they make mistakes. So, as I've done it on a number line, counting tens, this is a great one for counting in tens, because the last thing you want a child to be doing, especially when they are sitting in a quiz situation, is drawing out tens, like lots of tens, 10 dots. They should already know how to count in their tens, but I would say that children find this a lot more comforting because they're able to really clearly see what they're writing. So yeah, there are the 4 areas or 4 methods of multiplication. I hope you found it useful. Comment if there's anything in particular that you would like to see, anything that I've missed. Yeah, thanks.